Hello and welcome to the agenda here on Labour Social. Sorry about that. We had a few technical problems, little gremlins on YouTube. That's my excuse and I'm sticking to it. Today I'm joined by Femi Oluwole, the veteran anti-Brexit campaigner or pro-EU campaigner, I think you'd prefer to be called, right?
I tend to go with anti-Brexit.
Yeah, because it's a terrible, terrible idea. Now, has anything happened in the last 9 years, to convince you that Brexit isn't a terrible idea?
Oh, I'd say pretty much nothing.
It's all kind of turned out horribly like we said it would, hasn't it?
Yeah,
In many
it's one of the
ways.
worst things to be right about, the destruction of your country. But there you go.
Right, should we play a couple of videos? I've got some videos of Femi from back in the day. We've got one of where you're talking to John Redwood on the radio. We've got a couple with Farage, and we've got one talking about how it's all about to fail in the next few weeks. What would you like to watch first?
Oh, let's go Redwood because that's the core one, I think.
That's the cool one. Okay. Just give me a moment. I will get that up for you. Here we go.
John Redwood is here to help me with all this. A former Cabinet Minister, Conservative MP for Wokingham, of course. And Femi is with me as well, co-founder of Our Future, Our Choice. And on the website, it says that this is a group of angry, determined young people who think Brexit is a disaster and should be stopped. So there you go. Femi, John, welcome to both of you. Femi, if I can start with you first and ask you the question, shouldn't we have a preferred option by now? And what should it be? Good afternoon.
Well, hi. A poll was that says that 3/4 of Brits have no idea which reason they want from Brexit, and that is just exactly what we're seeing right now. We're seeing still 2 years after the Brexit vote, we're seeing infighting in the Tory party because they can't decide what position they want to go for. And the reason they can't decide for that is because their own experts say that every possible Brexit scenario leaves this country financially, economically worse off, which means that right now what they're trying to do is something that they know will harm the country. That makes it official Tory policy to harm the country. So of course they can't find a position because there's nothing that's going to actually be acceptable to the British people.
Okay, John Redwood, if you'd like to respond to that, good afternoon to you.
No, I don't think I'll respond to that. I wasn't told we were having a debate. You asked me to do an interview on what the options are for our future trading arrangement, and I'm very happy to talk about that.
Oh my God. I didn't realise he just cut you off there. There's no debate to be had. I was brought on here to just talk a load of bollocks unchallenged. How very dare you? Sorry, Femi, I cut you Sam there. But yeah, I was just saying.
It's the fact that they knew from 2018 that no matter what they did with Brexit, no matter all the negotiations they were doing, they were just figuring out exactly how they were going to hurt us. They knew there was no way that it would actually make life better. And they've known that for more than half a decade. And so right now we're in a place where they're all admitting, yes, Brexit has hurt us. You've got Jeremy Hunt, the Chancellor, saying that joining the single market would improve our growth. You've got Rishi Sunak saying that our exports are lagging behind other similar countries, and Brexit, I'm sure, is a large part of that. You've got Kemi Badenoch saying that Brexit has been particularly, the word she used was traumatic for the car industry. So they've all admitted it now, but back then, no. And they'll actually run away from interviews if you even mention it to them.
Yeah, and this was something that we saw across the board. They really hated being challenged. And one of the most frustrating things about when we were fighting against Brexit, when there was a chance that we could actually stop it, was the fact that we had hardly any support from the media. You didn't have people asking the questions that should have been asked. They were just like getting these ministers on and saying, "Is there anything you'd like to say, Minister?" And then once they finished, they were like, "Thank you very much. Good night." And it was just like there was no challenge. And when there was, like James O'Brien on Newsnight at the time, that when there was any kickback, they got rid of him. They were like, "No, can't have this. Can't have this."
The painful thing is it was so simple to actually have the conversation because all you had to say is, okay, so Nigel Farage is saying that this deal is unacceptable. Boris Johnson is saying that this deal is acceptable. The DUP are saying that this deal is unacceptable. That means the 52% do not agree with each other. They want different and incompatible relationships with the European Union. So it's not mathematically possible to please all the people who voted for Brexit. However, the 48% who voted Remain all voted for the exact same relationship as defined by the treaties of the European Union. So
Yeah.
if the 17, what is the will of the people? And that question was never really asked.
No, and it was interesting that you're talking there about the infighting in the Tory party. You know, this was supposed to stop the infighting in the Tory party. Do you know what it reminds me of? There's a sketch by Mitchell and Webb where they're talking about plotting to assassinate Diana, and they're like, "Why are we doing this?" And like, because if we do this and we get rid of her, then she's too popular, and if we kill her, then no one will mention her ever again. And it's the same sort of thing. Like, if we Brexit, the Tory party, it'll all come together. There'll be no more infighting. Everyone will get along. Everyone will sing from the same hymn sheet. And it's like the opposite happens. You idiots.
Another analogy would be like Remainers are like, with spoiler alert, Obi-Wan Kenobi. When he said, "If you strike us down, we will become more powerful than you would ever imagine."
Yes.
And that's what's happened.
That's what happened.
You've made Brexit happen, and now you've made all Remainers be historically right for the rest of time.
Yeah. Anyway, we just got a super chat from GGHK. Says Femi is a legend, which I agree with. So there you go. Thank you very much for that. So we go on to some other clips as well. So that was from 2018, and it's phenomenal the way you're saying, like, it's going to make us poorer. It's going to do this. And like, was there anything that you feel like you said at the time that you feel now, looking back, you kind of over-egged, or you felt you were exaggerating it a bit compared with how it actually turned out?
So occasionally I look back at my clips about this idea of getting Brexit done, because I would make the argument at the time in 2019 of it's taken us 3 years to negotiate a withdrawal agreement, which only lasts for the first 12 months, essentially, where we essentially a transition period where we stay within the single market, and then we actually had to negotiate a long-term trade deal in that 12 months, which then started in 2021. And I said, well, if it took us 3 years to negotiate the withdrawal agreement, which lasts 12 months, it'll take us much longer to negotiate a trade deal. Now, we did negotiate the trade deal, but we're still renegotiating it now. So it wasn't quite accurate to say we couldn't negotiate a trade deal, but we couldn't negotiate a long-lasting and permanent one.
A decent one. I think that was the main argument, wasn't it? And I think there was a point where we thought that they wouldn't be so goddamn stupid as to do this. Like in 2020, when we were dealing with a bloody pandemic, and over 100,000 people in the UK died in that first year, and they were prattling about doing a trade deal, which they could have deferred it for another year. They could have deferred it for another couple of years. I mean, that was an option there, but they chose not to take it. And it was like, right, we've got to get this sorted. Christmas 2020, all done. Thank you very much. And it's like, no, there's so much left to be done. Now,
it's the fact that they knew that the UK suffered the worst recession in the G7 in 2020. We had the highest excess death rate in 2020. Our NHS was on its knees. Our economy was on its knees. And so any sensible person, even if you are a absolutely committed Brexiteer, would think, okay, all our experts say that no matter what we do with this Brexit, it will make us poor, and every medical body in the country is saying it'll damage the NHS. Right now, we're in a pandemic and a recession. This doesn't seem like the sort of thing we should do right this second. Maybe if we just waited a little bit. But no, they are utter monsters. There is no humanity there whatsoever.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. But I was watching a video of yours that I think you did this week, but it had clips from earlier, and you were talking about your experience going to Northern Ireland and how you'd really experienced, understood the Good Friday Agreement a lot better. We did the same thing with the Three Blokes in the Pub. We went over, we met with one of the people who helped write the Good Friday Agreement. We went to Newry on the border and talked to the people in the border community there about what effect it would have. And it like Gibraltar, which you also went to, it seemed like just an absolute afterthought. Like no one really gave it any regard, because I think the thing that most people sort of don't, looking back, we don't think about this too much, but they didn't think they were going to win. I mean, they really seriously did not think they were actually going to win that referendum. And when they did, it was like, they were like rabbits in headlights. Do you remember they all sort of disappeared and scattered? I don't want to do it.
Oh yeah. So it was Saeed Avarsi who said that the David Cameron's plan was to get a coalition government and not an outright majority, which would mean that, yes, we'll put the referendum in the manifesto to please UKIP voters so we don't lose any votes to UKIP. But because we end up in a coalition, the Lib Dems won't allow us to do it, and so we won't actually have to do it. So they didn't actually think they were going to have the referendum in the first place. And then when it comes to actually winning the referendum, the way that I put it is like it's that scene from The Dark Knight where the Joker's like, do I look like a guy with a plan? You know what I am? I'm a dog chasing cars. I wouldn't know what to do with one if I caught it.
Yeah, exactly.
I just do things.
There was a great comedy movie from the 1960s called The Mouse That Roared with Peter Sellers in, and it was very, very funny. And it was about this tiny little island nation that declared war on the US, not intending to win, intending to lose, and then get all this like money in rebuilding and reparations because the government was bankrupt. And one way or another, they end up winning the war against America. It's just like, that's what it's like. It's like, oh shit, what do we do now? And the fact that you have video footage of all of these dickheads now on, like Daniel Hannan saying nobody is talking about leaving the single market. Nobody's even talking about that. I mean, as if it would be so crazy as to leave the single market. And now, apparently, that was a thing that was promised on the ballot paper, that we were going to leave the single market. But I mean, when I was talking about the frustration about not being sort of having these politicians and chancellors like Nigel Farage being able to go on the TV and the radio. Farage had a regular 6 o'clock radio show on LBC.
7 o'clock on LBC. I watched it every single day.
You poor bastard. I didn't.
I know.
I totally did.
It was self-flagellation. I wanted to make sure that I knew all of his arguments before I started calling him up. And so it got to the point that I started calling him up. I knew exactly what he was going to say, exactly how I was going to argue. And by about the fourth time I had a call with him, I actually scripted out how the conversation would go and posted it to Twitter. And it went like that, line by line.
Okay, well, let's have a watch. Let's have a watch of one of them, okay?
Femi, hello.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Is Blair right? Should we do a different deal with the EU on immigration and then have a second referendum?
His point, one of the points he was making today was that we can address immigration better while still remaining in the EU. And one of the issues with immigration is the fact that the government simply hasn't been living up to its promises. It says it will control immigration, but it hasn't. And then you've got to ask why. What tools does it have at its disposal to control immigration? And you'd think that it's the EU that has this open border policy that's letting in everybody. But I'm reading right here Article 7 of the EU Citizens' Rights Directive, which says that in order to come here without a job, you need to have sufficient resources to not become a burden on the social assistance system of the host country, or have comprehensive medical insurance.
Yeah, it's theory and practice, isn't it? It's theory and practice.
Yeah, it's in theory and practice, but then you've got to ask yourself, if the government hasn't been implementing EU-made restrictions on immigration, then who should we be blaming? Should we be blaming the EU or should we be blaming the government?
Well, what about blaming Tony Blair? What about blaming the very person who today is suggesting things can be done differently? He's the guy that opened it all up, in every way, and not just, Femi, to the EU. He did it to the whole world as well, because he wanted to fundamentally change British society. Well, I suppose he succeeded with that. Femi, in theory, you're right. In theory, under European treaties, there are restrictions that can be placed, but the truth is hardly anybody does.
That's true, but then is the answer Brexit? Is the answer to leave the very institution that's putting in place the restrictions that we need? Or is the answer to basically give more power to the government that hasn't been implementing restrictions? In fact, logically speaking, if the EU has restrictions on immigration and the UK hasn't been implementing them, leaving the EU would mean more immigration.
Bang. And it has. You said it there, mate. When was that? Was that 2017, 2018?
Yeah, 2017. We've immigration since then.
There you go. Leaving the EU would mean more immigration. You said it.
Yep.
Live. And here we are with record levels of immigration and record numbers of people coming here illegally as well.
And it's the fact that in 2016, Nigel Farage said, between now and June 23rd, we're going to make one very simple point. When Theresa May says that it's difficult to control immigration as a member of the EU, she's wrong. It's not difficult, it's impossible. There is absolutely nothing we can do to stop unlimited numbers of people from EU countries settling in this country and enjoying the same rights and privileges as all the rest of us. And then there he is in that video saying, in theory, Femi, you're right. In theory, under European treaties, there are restrictions that can be placed. So he's just admitted that his only point as our reason for leaving the EU was a lie. And he admitted that in 2017.
Jesus. It's painful, isn't it, watching this back? I got a quick video from when we did the People's March for Europe. My God, this is going back. This is from September 2017. So this is I think is this before OFOC?
Yes, it was before OFOC. OFOC started at the start of 2018, end of 2017.
All right, okay. So this is a year before Three Blokes in the Pub. This is me at the I was emceeing, which I've never done before. I always thought it was something to do with DJing, but apparently it's just being like the host of the protest on what was it? Parliament Green, is it? That little square,
Parliament Square.
outside
Yeah.
Parliament Square. That's the one. The little green square. All right, here it is. Anyway. Hello, everybody. Oh, hello.
EU, which means that you, your children, your grandchildren will no longer be able to study, to start a business, to buy a house, to retire in some of the most beautiful, the richest, and the most democratic nations in the world. Those rights that you've had for the last 40 years are about to be stripped from you. I have committed no crime. We have lost no war. Why are our rights being taken from us? If it was good for democracy, we could have a third referendum. People are talking about a second one, but we already had one back in the 70s, which I feel we should have respected. But we didn't, we had a second. So if we can have a second, we can have a third. Because that's the way democracy works. And to those people who lost in 1975, I say shut up and get over it.
Cool. I haven't watched that back. I've never watched that back, actually. That's quite interesting. I went and did that off the back of a 3-week journey around Europe to every country in Europe for a new Guinness World Record, which I didn't actually get because it turned out after I'd done it, I went to every country in Europe in less than 3 weeks, including Turkey and Cyprus. And then when I got back, they said, oh, by the way, Guinness said to me, oh, we don't actually include Turkey and Cyprus as part of our definition of Europe.
Wow.
Obviously Cyprus is like way out east,
Yeah.
so it's one of the hardest places to get to.
Yeah.
Compared with other countries in Europe, because there's like no train to get there. And they were like, no, you're not getting your Guinness World Record. So I just literally got back from that the night before, and then I'm on stage going, right, what's going on again? But that was quite funny. We've got some trolls in the chat. That's funny. Did you bring some trolls along with you, Femi? Because
I seem to be a magnet for them. Let's see what we got.
I think they might have been deleted. The messages have been deleted.
Okay.
They're gone.
Cool.
We've got some really great mods out there. Thank you, mods.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah. So, I mean, now sort of looking forward, one of the other things I was going to talk to you about as well, since this is Labour Social, and I was mentioning about the fact that I didn't feel like we were being backed up by any journalists who actually I felt really, really undervalued by Labour at the time. It drove me up the effing wall. Like, the Labour leader at the time would make a point of going to Morecambe or going to Switzerland to give someone an award on a day that there was a massive march in London, hundreds of thousands of people there, marching against the Tories' flagship policy.
And let's be really clear, because I don't want to get people's backs up in the chat. Like, we're putting, for me personally, I put Jeremy Corbyn and Keir Starmer in the exact same box on this, because neither of them have had our backs on Brexit when we've wanted them to. As far as back then, so we're not in some sort of Blairite versus Corbynite thing. This is just a case of the biggest policy the Tories have introduced in the last 10 years. The majority of Labour members and voters were in opposition to it, but the leader of the Labour Party was supporting it. That is a situation which should never have happened. And Jeremy Corbyn even went on the Marr show, and Marr asked him, your members and supporters want a second referendum. They want to be in the single market. Why don't you listen to them? Why don't you listen to members? And Corbyn said, I listen to members all the time. I don't know what polls have been put to the members, etc. But I'm aware that Labour members overwhelmingly voted to remain. Labour voters voted overwhelmingly to remain, but a third of them didn't. A third of them voted the other way. I want to win the next election. Now, that's somebody who is literally saying, let the left of the UK overwhelmingly opposes Brexit for all the reasons we know, in terms of it making people poor, the damage it would do to small businesses, the damage it would do to the NHS, the emboldening of the Tories and the right-wing agenda against human rights. But I'm still going to go the other way. And that is something that is only able to happen because, and it happens in the States as well, the left-wing incumbent leaders feel that they can do whatever they like, because who is the left going to vote for if not for them? They're not going to vote for Boris Johnson. They're not going to vote for Trump. And so they think they can do whatever they like without really listening to us. And that's been a problem both under Jeremy Corbyn and under Keir Starmer, which is why it's so critical that everybody focuses on changing the voting system.
I thought you were going to say this. We need proportional representation. But the Tories are actually going the other way. They're making our democratic system less fair. They're taking away the single transferable vote system from our mayoral elections around the country. So now people won't be able to vote, say, Green first and then Labour second. No, it's just going to be one vote, because they're hoping to split the left vote. They're bringing in, they brought in voter ID, but it's going to be a big shock to a lot of people. Like here in Durham, in my constituency, we haven't had an election yet, because we didn't have local elections last year, where you have to bring voter ID. And there's loads of people who don't pay attention to this stuff. You know, if you're not into Formula One, you don't know that Hamilton has signed up to Ferrari. You don't care. It's not something that's going to impact your life in any way. But once every 5 years, people feel, quite rightly, that they have a duty to go out and vote. Yep. And then they're like, oh, hang on, what? You've changed the rules. No one told us. Because they all expect us to be politics wonks, so we're really into this stuff.
And last year, it was 14,000 people that were turned away from the door when they tried to vote. And afterwards, Jacob Rees-Mogg actually said on camera, parties that try and gerrymander often find that their clever schemes come back to bite them, as I found, as we found when we insisted on photo ID for voting. So he literally said that they tried to rig UK elections. The party of democracy, the party of the will of the people, bluntly saying, we tried to rig elections.
And nothing happened to him. How did he get away with that? It's like... Imagine going, like you've just done your A-levels and then you turn up to the NEAB or whatever it is and you're like, by the way, I cheated. I totally cheated. I had all the answers on my hand. And they're like, that's all right. We're going to give you an A anyway, Graham. And I'm like, but I just admitted to... that's okay. Have a lollipop. Tap me on the head.
Alongside changing the voting system, we also need a written constitution, because we need to have actual consequences for this kind of shit. You can't have... I'm talking rules like if you deliberately corrupt the UK election, there should be jail time. If you deliberately, if you break the law during a referendum, during an election, then that should call into question the validity of that vote, especially if you were the winning party. If you tell a lie that you should reasonably have known was a lie at the time, and that supports a policy that is introduced and that results in serious damage to the economy and potentially the loss of life by damaging the NHS, as happened with Brexit, that should result in jail time. Because if we told a lie on our taxes and we cost the economy, let's say £1,000 in tax revenue, we'd go to jail. But if Boris Johnson tells a lie on a bus and it costs the economy £100 billion a year, he gets a government job.
Well, one of the things that people said back in the day, when after the election, after the referendum, was when we said, look, vote Leave broke the law. Leave.eu broke the law. Leave broke the law. And say, yeah, but the Remain side, they broke the rules as well. And I'm like, okay, I don't think that's true. But even if it is true, do we have competitions to see who can cheat the best? Do you know what I mean? It's like, oh, well, you both cheated. So whoever's the best at cheating wins the competition, wins the Champions League. No, you'll annul the competition and run it again, making sure that this time no one cheats on either side.
What your point stands exactly, but also when they say that the Remain campaign broke the law, that was about how we filed the returns. The actual amount that was spent didn't go over. However, the Leave campaign overspent by £449,000. So we didn't actually overspend. We just the stronger end people, they didn't file their returns properly, and they corrected it, paid the fine, and it was fine.
That's another thing the Tories have done. So they've doubled the amount you can spend on political parties now, political donations. That's nice. Yeah. It's not like all the 177 billionaires in this country all support the Tories or not. And they brought in this new rule that if you haven't lived here for 50 years, you can still vote. You get someone to vote on your behalf. I'm like, what? How? Oh my God. And they just get away with it. And like, it feels like there's Bylines and the Private Eye and Carol Vorderman, the Good Law Project, led by donkeys, holding these people to account. And there's so much. It's like the silence of the media when it comes to actually looking at this stuff and saying, hang on.
But believe me, the extent to which I have tried with every place I've been, I've tried so hard to push for more conversations on the policing bill, the suppression of protest rights when I was in Jeremy Vine. And frankly, they just didn't want to talk about it. It was
Thunberg's in court today, isn't she? Charged with protesting in the wrong place. That's the charge.
We're talking about the suppression of our most fundamental rights, and the media just does not want to talk about it. Like it went through the House of Parliament, and the Human Rights Committee of our Parliament declared point blank, this violates our right to protest, and the law still went through, and there are no consequences for it, and the media was virtually silent.
Yeah. It's infuriating. It is, but I mean, when we talk about like the media and the silence on this matter, it means that we don't find out about it unless we go digging. It's not put in our face, not like Keir Starmer's curry, you know. Every day for 5 days, on the front of the Mail.
That's the thing. They will actually, when it comes to what's on their websites, they will mostly cover most things that you would hope they would actually cover. But when it comes to, most people aren't on the news website unless they're actively engaged in politics. Most people, your average person, will get the news either from the radio, or from the TV. So it has to be involved in that conversation if it's really going to cut through to most people. And so, it shows their priorities, because they want the clicks from the website. But in terms of actually influencing people, in terms of influencing the conversation, they won't put those things in. So you'll get all the stuff about what's happening with Brexit from the various sites. Ironically, you'll get more stuff about the chaos of Brexit from the Express, which I never thought would be a thing. But the Daily Express is constantly complaining about Brexit, more so than the BBC.
Make it make sense.
I know.
But their attitude is because we didn't Brexit properly. Do you know what I mean? We should have Brexited harder, and then it would have been great. Which is kind of like, you know, the argument for communism, that it's not been tried properly. So all these different states that tried communism and it didn't work, they're like, oh no, but they didn't do it properly. If it was done properly, it would be perfect. It would be utopia. And it's the same sort of attitude of like, you know, but you have to deal with the reality that you're presented with. If you keep trying to make, you know, a decent Fantastic Four movie, there's a point where you've got to say, you've got to stop making these fucking movies because they're all bloody awful.
Don't diss my man Reed Richards like that.
You know it's true, Femi. You know it's true. But it's a definition of madness, isn't it? The trying the same thing again and again and expecting a different result. And the thing is, are you kind of now in your relationship with other people that you know in real life, has anyone who voted for Brexit and has watched your stuff, and have they actually said to you, Femi, I'm sorry? Do you know what I mean? Like,
honestly, it can be quite painful at times, because I know there are people that were huge parts of my life who essentially no longer are, because they were hardcore with Brexit, Brexit, Brexit. And I at some point I couldn't talk to them, because I'd be like, "Hey, how's your day?" "Oh, me, I'm just doing everything I can to go against every value you've ever held." Like, it's difficult to really maintain the friendship.
Yes.
But
Have you had
since
any
then,
apologies? Have you had people come up and say, "Yeah, you're right, Femi, it has been a bit shit"?
uh, I've had people that were on board with it say they've changed their mind about it, but not necessarily because of what I've said, but because of the stuff that they've seen.
Yeah.
So it has, people have gradually at least soften their view on things. The main issue here is, for me, it's who are they blaming for the fact that it hasn't turned out as they hoped it would?
Yeah.
Are they blaming the EU? Are they blaming Remainers? Or are they putting the blame where it belongs, which is the people that told them that Brexit would go well, even though their own experts said that there was no way that it would? That's the main issue.
They made a lot of money from it, though, to be fair. I know we talk about like Brexiteers being dickheads, but they have made a lot of money out of it. The disaster capitalists behind all this mad plot to impose economic sanctions on ourselves. So
there's definitely money that's been made when you think about the fact that, as I said in one of my conversation with Farage, I predicted in 2017, if you make it more expensive to trade to the EU, then it's going to be the biggest multinational corporations that can actually afford those extra costs. They can absorb those costs. You heard Andrea Leadsom talking about businesses always knew the cost of business, or something crap like that earlier this week. And she was talking about that some businesses will just simply absorb those costs. Yeah, but that means that the larger corporations will actually gain a competitive advantage over small businesses. So you're giving an advantage to large corporations. And so even if the overall trade goes down, those large corporations will still get a bigger share of that trade. And so that's where money can be made.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, should we watch another clip? Should we watch a clip of you taking Farage on again? I've got a load of them. here's Femi versus Farage round two.
Femi from Vienna, good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Farage. You led the Brexit campaign, saying that you were going to return the UK to order. You called it a victory for ordinary people, but not for regular people.
Yes.
You said it was a victory against the multinationals and globalization.
I did.
And I just had a quick question. By leaving the single market, it makes it by definition more expensive to trade into the EU, because you have to adapt your products to the legislation of 28 different countries where the rule is mutual recognition. Because mutual recognition is the rule that allows us to make a product in a certain way that matches UK legislation, which means that all other EU countries have to accept it, which means by definition makes it more expensive. Now, if you're a smaller country, you might decide
Femi.
You might can I just finish? Can I finish, please?
Well, I think you've made the point.
If you were a smaller company, that means it's harder for you to trade into Europe. A smaller company can't afford to trade to Japan, to the Commonwealth.
Hang on, Femi. You're getting terribly excited about this. Let's just agree on one basic fact, shall we? 85% of the world's economy, and that percentage grows every year, is outside the European Union, and there's a trade with any.
And can small companies export to the outside of the European Union?
Yes, of course they can. If they have the right product at the right price, then yes,
it's much more expensive. By definition, they become multinationals.
So should we obsess? Should we obsess
it makes it more expensive
on the 15%
the EU, and who does
of the
that
global
benefit?
economy
It benefits
that is Europe?
It benefits the companies that are large enough to afford to export to it beyond the EU more than it benefits those who can barely afford to export to Europe. So, who does Brexit benefit?
Do you know what, Femi? Look, even if you reduce tariffs, the regulations that get put on small businesses are hardly a benefit, in my view. We're going to agree to disagree. You call me again. We'll have that chat again. I'm out of time now. You're listening to the Nigel Farage Show, exclusively on LBC. It's 7:30 and time for the news with Tom Watt.
What an arsehole. But there you go. Yeah, exactly what you were just saying about small businesses being impacted the worst by Brexit, and the big multinationals, like Coca-Cola, Starbucks, like Fujitsu, cleaning up massively, which is, mate.
This is one of the painful things about the fact that we couldn't get the leadership of the left on board with it, because they had this idea that the EU is some neoliberal capitalist club.
Yeah.
But the actual, when you look at the practicality of it, if you're simply handing an advantage to large corporations, which goes against everything that you claim to stand for, and it's working people that have suffered as a result of it. It's just so painful to watch.
Yeah, and I mean that's why at the time, like I was absolutely furious with Labour for not supporting us in the way that they felt they should have. Well, actually, individual Labour MPs would come on stage with us and you know, actually put the case forward for staying in the EU. I shared a stage with both Louise Ellman and Luciana Berger, who are two Liverpool MPs who actually left Labour for other reasons than Brexit, but they were passionate about us staying in the EU because it helped normal people. I made a video yesterday about how Brexit, if you're rich, it doesn't affect you because you can still go and study abroad, you can still go live abroad, you still marry someone from another country. Like all the things, all the hurdles that have been put in the way for the rest of us, they don't exist. So when you ask who benefits from it, it's the rich get richer and the poor. Those things that we used to have for free, the things used to be a right, a birthright of ours to go and live and work around Europe, been taken away. And we can't do anything about it. And that right hasn't been taken from the rich. It pisses me off. It's
exactly
regressive.
They kept saying, "Oh, you want to go on your ski trips? It's just free movement is just for the rich." Nah, free movement is by definition free. That's why they call it free movement. It opens up a job market of 31 countries. I mean, in the UK, in France, tuition is free for universities. You can get yourself a degree for free. There's a €200 administration charge per year, but other than that, it's free. Slightly less expensive than what it is here in the UK. So social mobility, it actually opens a door to social mobility. There were 25,000 Brits working in the hospitality sector across Europe before Brexit, and now that's pretty much dropped to almost nothing now, because it's too difficult to get those jobs across there.
Yeah. Thank you very much to Canal over there in Singapore for the super chat. Maybe I can bribe you to evict the frog from my screen, the nicotine-stained man frog. That is Nigel Farage. I couldn't speak to him. I think I'll just get too wound up by him. Do you know what I mean? Like I've got so much respect for you, Femi, for actually calling him up, because I'll just be like, there's a point where you're talking to someone who's just like a greasy, used car salesman. No offense to people who sell used cars, but that type. Better call Saul. Do you know what I mean? He's got an answer for everything, and it all makes sense kind of in his head. And the way when you were saying about the fact that Europe does allow us to, or the EU allows us to regulate immigration. It's like, well, yes, of course it does, but we don't actually do that. And you're like, well, why would you give more power to the people who are not enforcing those laws, i.e. the government?
Yeah.
And he's just got no comeback for it. He's just got nothing. It's just
none. And it's on the topic of immigration. He's just played into the fact that the conversation around immigration has been so broken for so long. Because the narrative, unfortunately, those of us on the left, and I've said this many times, we look at immigration through a right-wing lens. We think, well, I do understand you might be against immigration on the basis of, well, if there's an unlimited supply of workers, then that means that employers have the upper hand because they can just choose who works and they can lower the pay, and the workers will fight amongst each other. And it's that sort of capitalist dog-eat-dog supply and demand way of thinking about things. But no. If we are actually on the left, we should be thinking at it from that perspective, i.e., we should be strengthening unions, strengthening workers so they can demand fair pay and regulate against the exploitation of workers on low pay, so that no matter how many workers there are in the system, there's no way they can be exploited. That should be what all of our policies are geared towards. And especially when we know that immigration is a net benefit to our economy, we should be making sure that benefit is shared equally across the country. That is the whole point of government.
Yeah, but not this government.
Yeah.
Well, I always think that a government's what's its main role? It's to protect the village, and whether that protection is from multinationals who want to rip you off, or slave owners that want to enslave you, or a foreign invading army, or someone in your own community that wishes to do you harm, or disease, or ignorance. All these things we should be protected against. But the government has got this really weird, warped view of what their role is, and it doesn't seem to be anything to do with protecting us or our rights. It just seems to be making as much money as possible while you can.
Yep.
Which is why I think that Rishi Sunak has dialed back on the Canada trade treaty and other trade treaties that we were looking at in favour of the Indian trade treaty, which he stands to make a lot of money out of if it goes through his Infosys shares. It's funny that, isn't it?
For me, I look at Rishi Sunak and the way in which there's lots to talk about when is this election going to be called, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be called at the absolute last minute, because he's done so much just to get that job. The amount of because he's gone into a party that I'm sure he knows is racist, and he's gone into that. He's put himself through all of that, and it's all been to get that top job. And after this, he knows he's going to lose. He knows he's never going to be made prime minister again. So why wouldn't he just run the clock out to its maximum level? It's all about him.
Yeah. And I mean, we've got another 9 months of this, mate. At least. And it's going to be, it's going to get worse before it gets better. I can state that with certainty.
Okay.
So was apart from sort of thinking that things might be a little bit worse, when I sort about things like we got wrong, not necessarily about how Brexit turned out, but like if you had to rerun the campaign, you were ahead of Our Fuck, Our Future, Our Choice, what would you do differently knowing what you know now?
I would nail the messaging down in terms of how to explain what the whole thing was, because the problem was a fundamental misunderstanding as to what that referendum meant, i.e., we're talking about leave and remain the EU. So if we're looking, what is the actual subject matter? What is the topic of that question? It's international relations, the relationship between the UK and the EU. And international relations runs on treaties. So remain meant the treaties of the European Union, the treaties that actually create the EU, that join those countries together. It's a specific relationship with thousands of pages involved. What did leave mean? It meant literally any other relationship. And that could be anything from a no-deal Brexit to a Norway-style Brexit to a Canada-style Brexit, Australia. I mean, you heard all those things like Malta's Compromise A, Malta's Compromise B, all that stuff, all the different options, checkers that they were going through. And there was not one single version of those that had the complete support of the 17.4 million people who voted for Brexit. So it was never mathematically possible to nail them all. So I think nailing down that specific message and just repeating it over and over again. I repeated it on a regular basis, but I think if I'd have just stuck to that, it would have been even more effective.
Do you think that the tactics of the Remain camp could have been improved?
Like from 2016 or from the Stop Brexit?
Afterwards, from the Stop Brexit campaign.
Yes, I think there was lots that should have been done differently.
Dish the dirt, Femi. Dish the dirt. Go on. This is a safe space.
For starters, it shouldn't have been People's Front of Judea. There should have been a lot more.
Should have been the Judeans People's Front.
Exactly. It should have been. There were so many different groups, and yes, you need lots and lots of different groups, but they needed to coordinate much better than they did. There's also the issue of be aware of who exactly you're trying to convince. Like we had two very specific groups of people that were questioning of the idea of stopping Brexit. Those were people who had reservations about immigration and people who were in the Corbyn camp of we think the EU is some neoliberal Blairite, blah, 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 blah. Bringing on Tony Blair, the guy who raised immigration and brought in Blairism, is not going to help that. You're not going to win those people via Blair. So, and the number of times I would shout in the People's Vote campaign saying, "Why are you trying to piss off the people we're trying to convince?" It was painful.
Yeah. I mean, Jeremy Clarkson. That's what I thought. Like, we should have got hold of Jeremy Clarkson because a lot of meatheads listened to him, and he was a Remainer. So he could have gone on and said and explained to people. You know, I think if we'd done a viral video of Jeremy Clarkson saying, if Brexit was a car, it would be a Trabant. Do you know what I mean? He's got this plastic East German car on. He's like, here you go. This is what it would be like. And the engine falls out. If we'd had like a really slick little sort of 3-minute video with Jeremy Clarkson, I think that could have shifted it. Honestly, I'm not, you know. But we didn't. We went for people like you said, Tony Blair, who's just, he's radioactive kryptonite.
Jeremy Clarkson might have been effective. I don't know, like because we've all seen what Jeremy Clarkson has now become. I would have gone more towards Danny Dyer.
Danny Dyer was good. Yeah,
his little clip of what happened to David Cameron who called all this on. Why is he allowed to scuttle off? Twat.
Yeah. He did put it across very, very well. He's down in the south of France with his trotters up.
Exactly.
Thanks very much to John. John C. for the super chat. Woo! Says Femi and Graham, thank you very much for your contributions to Public Life. Listening to you both brings me hope for my children's future. Oh, thanks, John. Appreciate that, mate. But yeah, otherwise, Yoni's saying, otherwise Brexit is going as planned, but the front fell off. Well, exactly. But yeah, I think having people in the public eye, but at the time, I remember I was asked to go on a show on the BBC, and it was a Sunday morning show, and it wasn't anything to do with Brexit, it was to do with transport, it was to do with public transport. And it was, it was to do with discouraging people from flying as much as they do. And my argument is, if it's a family going on their once-a-year holiday to somewhere and it's cheaper to fly. We're talking about people who take a flight to get to work, or Rishi Sunak who takes a flight to get to Blackpool. That's ridiculous. You know, it's just like, no, stop doing that. And also, my point was that it's not just that flights, you know, need to get more expensive. It's that the infrastructure of the trains, you know, needs to be cheaper. So you can take a family of 4 to Spain on the train for less than it costs to fly. Anyway, but that sort of got lost in the argument, because there was a Tory there saying, you just want to stop poor people from having holidays, don't you, you bastard? I'm like, no, absolutely not. Anyway, but I was told specifically before I went on that I was not allowed to talk about Brexit at all. I was not allowed to say the word Brexit. And then even a few years ago, I was on Richard Osman's House of Games, and I was in the audience as an expert, a travel expert who could answer any question about travel. And the question was, which is the most powerful passport in the world? And when I was traveling to every country in the world in 2010, the most powerful passport in the world, the one that could get you into the most countries without visas, without letters of invitation, etc., was the British passport. And by the time, a couple of years ago when I was on Richard Osman's show, it was the Japanese passport. And like the British passport slipped down to number like 21 in the list. So it could like really drop down the list. So I thought I'd make a point about this. So during the recording of the show, I said, well, it used to be the British passport. Didn't mention Brexit. I just said it used to be the British passport, but now it's the Japanese passport. And that they at the end of the show, once they finished filming with all the comedians, they did some pickups. And they said, Graham, can you just say your line again? I said, okay. So it used to be the British passport back when I was traveling, but now it's the Japanese passport. And they're like, can you just say it's the Japanese passport? And like this terror that goes across the BBC, across all media, of even going there, even sounding like slyly saying that things aren't as good as they used to be. Don't say that.
No, it's infuriating. What the BBC's handling of Brexit is genuinely criminal. On pretty much every single level. Like even from just the absolute basics, from the fact that I had to correct their definition of the single market on their website. Like they published a glossary of all the different definitions to do with Brexit in 2018 in March, and it was up there up until October that year. And the definition that they had was a free trade area covering the various countries of the EU. Nothing to do with regulations. Now, the reason why that's such a dangerous way to talk about it is because the entire narrative of the Relief campaign was, well, just get a free trade deal like everyone else has with the EU, and we won't lose anything. completely forgetting that the single market isn't about tariffs, free trade. It's about a lack of regulatory barriers, a lack of the need to check stuff at the border.
Non-tariff barriers.
Non-tariff barriers, exactly.
Which brings us into this week and what's been going on.
Exactly. So it's the fact that we don't need to check stuff because we share the same laws as the rest of the EU. Now they had that on their website for like 6 months, and it feels deliberate. It feels like because they had to think, oh, we should probably get somebody who knows what the single market is to write this, and yet they still wrote that.
Yeah. It did feel quite deliberate that it was just like, don't mention the war, don't mention the Brexit. BUFC Mike saying in the chat, the Labour Party are a bit like that now. Yes, they are. But I understand why Labour are like that at the moment, because they've got to get their foot across the line in this bloody election coming up. But as soon as that's over, I'm going to be on their case like crazy, going, this is, what are we doing to ourselves? I'm pushing for regulatory alignment. That solves all the problems.
Exactly.
All the problems at the border, all the problems with Northern Ireland, solves it all. Regulatory alignment. Say it with me, people. Regulatory alignment. That's all we need.
And that's the thing. There's lots of debates about Keir Starmer in terms of should we attack him now? Should we wait till later? And there's a certain extent to which that debate isn't that critical right now, because I don't believe he's going to change between now and the election. However, we should all look forward to the fact that once we do actually get a Labour government, every single person within the Labour Party, outside the Labour Party, who's been saying we can't afford to oppose Brexit because the Daily Mail will crucify, we can't afford to do PR because the Daily Mail will crucify, the Tories will take advantage, that all those excuses disappear. So it will just be, you are the Prime Minister right now, help us, or you're just as good as the Tories.
Yeah,
so everybody in the left of the UK will all be screaming at Keir Starmer to actually say, God damn, do something.
And we're going to be screaming on this channel as well. We're independent of Labour, and we're not beholden to Labour HQ in any way, shape or form. So yeah, we'll be definitely doing that. So this week marks the 4th anniversary of us leaving the European Union, which is one of the reasons why we're having this chat today. I believe you were in Parliament Square on the day that we left, on the night that we left. Was that Claire Fox in the picture with you?
Yes, it was. It was.
Oh my God. So I was there as well, Femi, and I saw Claire Fox, and I called her a really rude name to her face.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go. Fun story. And go on, tell us about your experience in the square.
So I think it was Sky had invited both of us to cover it. They ended up pulling it, so and I was not happy with what they put me through. I had to walk through a crowd of exuberant Brexiteers who mostly knew my face at night on Brexit night. So that was fun, especially given the death threats that I've had for the last 2 years. And I think the saddest thing for me was seeing, and I've said this a bunch of times on my channel, seeing the guy with a Boris equals Brino sign.
Brexit in name only.
Exactly. So that was somebody, a Brexiteer in the crowd with seconds to go until we actually left the EU, still visibly making it clear the 52% didn't all want the same thing. And yet he would still, if you asked him, probably still insist, yeah, I know exactly what I was voting for. No, but you voted for this. Like, it doesn't matter what you had in your head. If I vote for cat and I think cat is dog, I still voted for cat. Like, it's painful, especially as after you spent like 2 years of your life saying Brexiteers don't all want the same thing, and there they are visibly showing it, and yet the media did nothing to help us.
Thank you very much to Veg Pie for the super chat. Woo! Femi and Graham continue to fight the good fight. We will. So, have I told you the story what we got up to on the day that we left in Parliament Square? So I was with the EU flag mafia, and we know a certain courier driver who can get you stuff. Do you know what I mean? You know, like Morgan Freeman in the Shawshank Redemption. So what we wanted him to get us is 10 cans of this stuff called surströmming, which is from Sweden. It's like fermented herring. Is it herring or something like that? It's the most horrific smell on earth. It smells of death, shit, moldy feet, and fish, all rolled into one. Anyway, so we had 10 cans of this stuff, and we just put it all over Parliament Square. We just put it on the floor. So the whole square absolutely stank. Obviously, we took it out the can, so it wasn't like we were littering or anything, but we made sure that the people who were who were celebrating us leaving the EU.
I respect
it's like going, yay! What's that smell? Oh, mate! And they're the kind of people, you know, when you go to a gig and there's always someone who just won't move, no matter what. You're trying to get out to go to the bloody toilet or something. Or you're trying to get to your mate and they're like, no, I've been here for 5 minutes. I'm not going to move. It was an entire crowd of people like that. So they were like, no, I've found my space. I'm defending it like it's my castle. So, rather amusing. I don't know if it should be admitting to that. It's probably against the law. Oh, well.
Probably, just slightly.
Sue me.
Well, it's only breaking law in a limited and specific way is fine.
Do you know where we left the cans? The empty cans.
Did you tell?
We left them on the doorstep at 55 Tufton Street.
No, it's good. It's good. It's good.
More. Anyway. So yeah, Countdown to Power says, "Oh my god, it must have absolutely reeked." It did. It really did. Oh my god, there was like a big concern, like getting any of it on our clothes because you'd have to burn your clothes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Burn the witch. So yeah, but yeah. So this week, we've got the new regulations coming in. Now it's just the certificates at the moment that we need, isn't it, for any fruit and veg, animal, plant product coming into the UK. This covers things like flowers and stuff like that. So if you're a florist who gets a lot of tulips from Amsterdam, you're suddenly going to be having to whack your prices up and pass that on to the consumer.
Exactly.
Did you ever get to take Jacob Rees-Mogg on?
Oh, on this particular issue, no. I think when the times I've spoken to him, it's been largely around the democratic issue of him arguing for no deal at the time, and me saying, well, can you guarantee that everybody who voted for Brexit would have voted for no deal if you'd put that on the ballot paper? And him just constantly just dancing around. So I never got to talk about this. I did speak to some small business owners. I spoke to a small business owner called Sally in Cowbridge in 2018. Who owns a stationery shop, and she gets a lot of her supplies from the EU, and she was just panicking because her prices had already gone up back then. God knows what's happening now.
Yeah. There was a fantastic response that you saw this from Marina Purkis to Jacob Rees-Mogg. Oh no, it was Boris Johnson actually. I know she had one for this is Marina Purkis on Twitter, responding to Mogg doing his, I think it's Moggalog on GB News. Brexit in a nutshell. A farmer tells Mogg his industry has been decimated by Brexit. Mogg spends the interview trying to convince him it hasn't been. All from the comfort of his GB News studio, having never run his own bath, never mind a farm.
Yeah, I love that.
She's not wrong, is she?
Yeah. I've often referred to Tories as the CEOs of pissing on you and telling you it's rain.
Well, indeed. I mean, GB News, I saw a photo and it was like Rees-Mogg and some other Tory MP, and they were being interviewed by a third Tory MP this week. And I was like, Ofcom. I mean, imagine Labour doing that, or the Lib Dems, or the SNP. Just the SNP, like
on BBC, a national news show.
Unbelievable. Is it possible to invest in Dutch black tulips? That's what Simon wants to know. Yes, invest now. It's hot. It's the new cryptocurrency, the new tulips, the tulip currency. So I heard that so at the moment it's just the certificates that we need, but not the food and things like that is not actually being inspected this week. But that's going to start in April. But then someone said to me that might get kicked back till October. Is that looking like it's likely, or have you not heard that?
So the thing is, like we've started the process now. Like they've been kicking this down the road 5 times for years at this point. So I think they're in for a penny to it. To be fair, they might kick it down the road, but the question is, are they going to keep kicking it down the road? Because the position that I've had before the start of this month was, if you kick it down the road again, if you do another delay, a 6th delay of this, then that means you'd have effectively refused to get Brexit done, i.e. broken your last main manifesto promise during the same year that you're trying to get people to trust you on your new manifesto, which I find to be insane. So I don't think they would refuse to get Brexit done during an election year because you're handing Labour their attack line.
But then also you're jacking up everyone's prices for their food and drink.
Yep,
And
and that's the thing.
And also, I mean, when we talk about small businesses, I mean, this has been going the other way for years now, that British exporters to the EU have been having to pay a lot more to export stuff. And also, you've got the situation with what you said in the interview earlier with I think that was with Farage, when you were saying about how difficult it is to trade with the Commonwealth if you're a small company. Like, forget about it, Joe. How much it costs to ship things around the world?
Exactly.
You know, I'm gonna sell me artisan cheeses to Tuvalu. I mean, it's just good luck with that, mate.
Yeah, it's what I was trying to get the point in that debate. Global Britain has always been an elitist project. Your small enterprises are not going to be able to sell their stuff to the other side of the planet. That's something for big corporations. This is only going to help. It's the same with every single step of this has been geared towards the elite. Yet they supposedly sold this as a victory for the little guy against the liberal metropolitan elite. You make it harder to go work in France and Europe, etc. It's going to be the richest people that can still do that. You make it harder to export there. It's going to be the biggest companies that can do that every single step of the way.
And that's one thing that really, really wound me up during the whole Brexit wars. The fact that we were called the metropolitan elite. You know, I'm going up against Rees-Mogg and Farage and
Boris Johnson.
Boris Johnson, a guy who calls £250,000 chicken feed and lives in Islington. And he's like, he's pointing at me, you know, saying, you're the problem because you are the metropolitan elite.
Yeah.
Like Dominic Cummings, whose family own a massive freaking estate down the road from me here in Durham. Yeah, he said, you know, I've got to get out of London. It's full of people who are like the metropolitan elite. And I'm like, you are the metropolitan elite. And it's that Nazi line, isn't it, about you always accuse your enemy of that with which you are guilty. And the Brexiteers are masters at that. It's one of the many similarities between Brexiteers and Nazis. Not the people who voted for Brexit necessarily, but the people who told you to vote for Brexit. There are a lot of parallels.
You'll get a lot of people's backs up if you make comparisons between the Brexit campaign and the Nazi propaganda that we saw in the 30s. But the thing is, they've actually done it themselves. Andy Wigmore, the communications director of Leave.eu, the organization that was set up by Richard Tice, who currently runs Reform, back in 2016, he did an interview where he was recorded saying, what the Nazi said was very clever. If you put aside all the hideous horror and if you look at just the way they presented things, it was very clever. And me being at the sharp end of this campaign, you look at it and you think, this is nothing new.
Yeah.
Sorry, what? You're literally saying that what you did during that campaign and the actual Nazis are essentially the same because what you did isn't anything new.
Yeah.
And when you look at it that way, you think, all right, what was the actual main message of the referendum campaign? It was, hey, you country, you've been humiliated by Europe in a broad sense, just as Germany had been in the war, in the First World War. And we're going to scapegoat one specific section of the population and blame them for all of our problems, immigrants. And we're going to return Britain to its former glory, make Britain great again. Okay, cool. That's not scary, historically speaking.
How'd that work out for you, Britain? How'd that work out for you? Well, Femi, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon on The Agenda. I'll be back at 9 o'clock tonight for the Labour Social with some special guests. So please join us for that, live and interactive. Thank you to everyone watching. Thanks to all the great comments and all the super chats. Really, really appreciate them very much. And until next time, I'll say bye to Femi. Bye, Femi.
Bye-bye.
And bye to all you guys. And I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.